What's up to all my kingdom strategists, and welcome to another episode of the Church Systems Podcast. Listen, when you show up here, I'm going to give you the tools that you need to help make the vision come to pass, to help you grow a healthy church. And when we talk about health, I'm talking about spiritual health. Your people are growing spiritually, they're becoming disciples of Jesus. I'm talking about numerical health. Your church is growing, it is increasing in size and in influence because every person who comes into the kingdom is a person we pulled out of hell. And I'm talking about financial health because ministry takes money, and I want you to have the resources you need to change as many lives as possible. Listen, I'm excited about this episode because in this episode, we're going to be talking about stop waiting, start inviting. All right. Stop waiting, start inviting. I'm about to tell you how 3 invites turned into 25 new members in our church in less than 7 days, right? If you know my story, you know that I've done a lot of different things. I've been a lead pastor, I've been a senior pastor, I've been a church planner, I've been an executive pastor, I've served on staffs, I've been a consultant, I've done all these different things. But from different seasons of life, I can pull stories that really contextualize some of the things that I teach. Because what I'm teaching you, I'm not teaching you just as some theory. I am teaching you because I've experienced it in some way. Somehow, some way, this was a part of my journey, a part of my life, and a part of my ministry. And so I'm going to do that exact same thing today. All right. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Henry Tolbert. I'm the owner and founder of Simple Systems Consulting. Right. And I am a guy. I am a dude who grew up as an athlete, who grew up in the church, who found his way through faith, who served in the church in many ways. And one day I got tired of complaining. I got tired of complaining about what was wrong with the church. And I decided to be a part of the solution for what was right. And so right now I spend my life, have committed my life, my committed myself to serving leaders just like you. I am successful in the calling that God has placed on my life when I help you become successful in what God has called you to do. And if you found your way here, I believe it's for a reason. So let's buckle up. All right. So I want to start by telling you a story, right? Because I've got some stuff to share and I know it's going to be great, but let me start with a story. So a few years back, I was a church planter, and at the time we had a 6 o'clock p.m. service. That's right. We launched a church and we did our services at 6 o'clock p.m. Now, why would you do a thing like that? Because that doesn't make sense. It's crazy. Well, here's the thing. We were in a traditional community. We were in a community that was dominated by traditional churches, Baptists mostly, but some in some other denominations. But the traditional church was really, really strong. But the problem with that is that this traditional city that we lived in had a college campus right in the middle of it. And so you've got basically a senior community that surrounds a college campus. And so when I looked at the landscape of the church and what God was calling us to do, I realized in that season that we were called to go after the young people. And it also made sense. And I know a lot of times we don't want to talk about this because we like to super spiritualize church instead of just using our brain sometimes. And I get that, it's all good. But for me, when I looked at the landscape of the church, I noticed that the vast majority of the people who were 45 and older were already in churches. They were in churches, they were locked up in churches, they had churches that they loved. But when I looked at people who were 45 and younger, a lot of them were either floating around or they were having to drive sometimes up to 30 or 45 minutes away if they really wanted to be a part of a church. And so as a result, the campus was a normal place on Sunday. Most of the kids weren't going to church, they weren't going anywhere, right? And so I'm sitting and I'm doing life on a campus that has, maybe between the students and the staff at that time, maybe around, let's say 2,500, 3,000 people on campus. And in my mind, I'm saying, Lord, if I can reach just 10% of that campus, we have a viable church plant, we have a viable church, and we can build something special. And so, what I decided to do in going after that crowd, I decided to come in low and go after them where they are. And so, rather than trying to convince them to wake up on a Sunday morning when I know they've been to parties all night, when I know they've been up all night, when I know they just left Waffle House at 2 a.m., I decided to build a 6 p.m. service. And so we started our service at 6 p.m. And I would even say to people, hey, once the hangover wears off, come to church, right? And that was legitimately our thing. Even when it came to volunteers, it allowed us to navigate better because we could borrow some people who believed in what we were doing, but they were already serving at another church. So we initially we borrowed musicians and we borrowed worship leaders, and we had all these people who we knew who were connected with us, who really loved our vision, but they were serving in other places already. Well, now because we're at 6 o'clock p.m., their church service in the morning, they can come over and can help us. And so we were able to build a dream team of sorts. We were able to borrow pieces from different places, pull them together, and really have them lock in to what God was doing at the church, right? So we start a 6 p.m. service, right? And I think this is so important. So many leaders, we want to go after a dynamic or a group of people who that is so sometimes so saturated, that is sometimes so competitive, that and then we get frustrated when it doesn't work, when it would just make more sense to really exegete your community. I say this all the time. Preachers are so great at exegeting in the text, but we need to learn how to exegete the place, the community that God has called us to go. Exegete your community, see who's not being touched. Maybe it presents an opportunity. So for us, we saw this opportunity with young adults, college students. So we did a 6 p.m. service. So on one particular day, and at this time, our church is very young. We may be about 50 people on a weekend. All right. And so we're in that space where we launched with 99 people. We grew down to 35, and we were just starting the ascension to come back up. So on this particular Sunday, it's about 5 p.m. and I just so happened to be standing out front of our storefront church. And as I'm standing there, I see three guys walking to the corner store. Now, I knew that some of the students would walk to this corner store and they would grab certain things that they would use for street pharmaceuticals, right? You know, the street pharmaceuticals that you can catch a whiff and you can smell when somebody's had it, and all that kind of stuff like that. And so I knew that that is what they would do. And so I'm watching these three guys go to the store, and I'm assuming they're going because they're getting the street pharmaceuticals. All right. And so I watched them go to the store, but I'm sitting and I'm like, nah, I'm finna invite them to church. I'm finna talk to them when they come back. And so they start walking back. By the time they get to the church, they've already fired up their street pharmaceuticals. They've got their stuff going. They're ready to go. And I said, hey, what y'all got going this weekend? And I start walking towards them. And they kind of stopped, like, hold up, stay back, preacher man, right? And I don't know, I guess they just assumed I was the preacher because I was standing there. And I said, what y'all doing this evening? They said, man, we chilling, man. I said, hey, why don't y'all come to church? They was like, nah, man, you don't want us in church, man. We the wrong people to be in church, bro. Like, nah, man. And, they got that California accent. And I'm like, nah, bro, for real. I want y'all to come to church, man. I'm the pastor. Like, I want y'all to come. They're like, you the pastor? I was like, nah, man, we ain't even got no church clothes, man. Look, this how we dress, man. They got on gym shorts, house shoes, and an A shirt, or a wife beater, as we called it, right? I'm like, bro, y'all can come to church just like that. I don't care what y'all got on. Y'all see what I'm wearing? I got on jeans and a shirt. This is what I'm preaching in today. They like, for real? I'm like, yeah, man, y'all just come to church. So long story short, those three guys, we start service at 6 p.m. At about 6:15, they walk in. They sit on the little side section and they're just hanging out. So I'm like, all right, bet. By then I'm getting ready to preach, I'm starting my sermon, whatever it is. So I start preaching. I'm just preaching the gospel as best I know how. And the whole message, they're looking at each other like, okay. And then I say something, they tapping each other, because I'm all about analogies. So I'm one of those people who does that really well. I often take culture references and put them in scripture to help people understand, right? That's what Jesus did. He took things that people did understand and used them to explain things that people did not understand. And so I'm teaching. So I get to the end and I make an invitation. And would you not believe it, that all three of them come to the altar for the invitation? And I'm praying with them. And I'm going to be honest with you. The scent was so strong. I felt like I was getting a little woozy and it wasn't in the spirit. Okay. I'm just telling the truth. But I stand there and I pray for them, man. And I speak over their lives and I invite them as members of the church, and I walk them through salvation, and I invite them to our classes so we can get started and all this kind of stuff like that. And they're like, all right, yeah. So in my heart of hearts, I'm like, man, that was a powerful day. I'm sitting there like, man, this day was powerful. Now, I don't know if they coming back, but that was a powerful day, right? So fast forward 7 days. Next Sunday comes around. It's time for service. And I will never forget it. It's time for service. And in walks these same three guys. But guess what? They've got a line of 25 people behind them. Like, hear what I'm saying to you. They've got, like, it might have been more. Like, it was the most epic thing ever because they came walking in together. It's like they met up somewhere on campus, walked to church and they all came in together. And they come walking in with 25 people. And as they walking in, I'm looking at the guys and I'm like, whoa, what's up? They was like, yeah, we brought the crew. This is what I didn't know. These guys were a part of a club called the California Club, which means that all the students from California who were going to school in Louisiana at that time, they had a club where they would get together, they would hang out, they would do stuff. It was a student organization. So these three guys who had come to church, little did I know they were like the ringleaders of the whole crew. And so they came to church and they brought 25 new people with them. And days, in 7 days, my willingness to invite three people to church turned into 25 new people in our church. And I'm telling you, man, it was an amazing thing. And it was such a powerful moment. And as I reflected on it, I wanted to come back and bring that to you because I want to share with you what I learned from that process and how you too can begin to see the same thing in your church, right? And maybe you're not by a college campus, and maybe you don't have people walking to a store by your church, but you have your own version of this story. Your own version of this story is right in front of you right now. You probably pass by it every single day. And today I'm going to give you the tools to reshape your vision so that you can be looking out for this opportunity as it comes to you. All right. So there are 6 things that I learned from this process that I want to share with you. Number 1, I want to share with you that you need to make consistent invites. You need to make consistent invites. You know, I'll be honest with you, as a church planter, I knew that the health of our church was contingent upon us reaching new people. You know, it's just the stark reality is that the fewer people you have, oftentimes the less you can do, and the more stress and the more weight that you carry as a senior leader. When there are not enough people to help carry the load, then what happens is that the senior leader and their family end up carrying so much of the load that it becomes even sometimes unhealthy for them. And so I came out of the gate saying, man, I got to invite. And so every chance I get, every person I knew, I would invite. In this particular case, I was stepping outside of my comfort zone and I was starting to invite people in the community because, again, I had exegeted the community. And so I knew the people who were not being reached. I knew that those traditional churches were not touching some guys walking to the corner store in the middle of the day on Sunday. I knew that they weren't touching these young adults, these young kids, these college students who were trying to find their way in life, but were unrefined. They were unchurched. They didn't understand, put on a suit and put on a tie. And I knew that. And so as a result, I kept making consistent invites. And not only did I make consistent invites, but I challenged our leaders to make invites. Every single meeting we had, every staff meeting, every worship rehearsal, everything we did, I was saying to them, hey, you need to invite somebody this week. That's how you get to be a part of the kingdom work. You need to invite somebody. And so one of the things that you should be doing is you should be making consistent invites. Listen to me. Inconsistent sowing leads to inconsistent harvest. You cannot have a consistent harvest in a place where you have not sown. Are you sowing the gospel in your community? Not just by preaching in church on Sunday, not just on social media, but by inviting real people to come to know Jesus. Are you making consistent invites? All right, that's the first thing you need to do. You need to make consistent invites. Number 2, you need to create a process for unchurched people. All right, most churches, if we're honest, most of our processes are fit for people who already have some understanding of the church. We don't realize it, but sometimes many of you, your processes are so biased because they lean towards people who already have an understanding of faith, who already have an understanding of who Jesus is, who already have an understanding of the church. But what we need to do is we need to think about, how do unchurched people integrate in our process? And here is how that changes so many things. When you know that you're reaching and you're dealing with unchurched people, then one of the things that you'll do is you'll start to re-explore and re-examine the language that you used. You'll start to look at and re-explore what are the foundational things that you need to teach people. I love to use the analogy of an on-ramp. When you're getting onto the highway, there's always an on-ramp, and that on-ramp is there to help you go from street speed to highway speed. And what that on ramp does is that it lessens the chances of accidents because here you are driving 15 miles an hour, getting ready to get on a highway with people driving 80 miles an hour. And if you don't adjust, it's going to cause some damage. Well, I think the same thing can happen in the church. If we don't help new people, unchurched people, adjust to being a part of the church, many times they either get left behind or they end up getting hurt because they simply don't understand. So when you're dealing with unchurched people, that means that you started the basics. You teach salvation. You walk them through a process. You know, one of the things I remember about us is that I don't know how we did this still because we didn't have the budget to do it, but we had a detailed process where we brought people in, we walked them through a class, and when people receive salvation, that same day, oh my goodness, I'm thinking about this and it's making me reminisce because this is before I knew anything about systems. But that same day, we gave them a physical Bible and a devotional. A physical Bible and a devotional. We say, hey, here's your Bible. We want you to start your journey. Start reading in the book of John. For the next 21 days, we want you to read one chapter of John every single day. And when I look back on it, that season produced some of the best, strongest disciples we ever had. But it's because we had a process. Does your church have a process? And if not, you need to create one. If not, you need to develop a process. And you don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to do it from scratch. You can use companies like ours that will build it for you, that already have built it, and will give you what we've built so that you can take the next step and move forward. But you've got to have a process. All right. Number three, the third thing that we did, and the third thing I would encourage you to do is make it easy for people to get active. You got to make it easy for people to get active. You know, especially when you're dealing with young people. When you're dealing with young people, many young people learn by doing, not by hearing. And so many of our processes in church can be geared towards getting people to sit back and listen. Like stop and think for a moment how many of your church activities are activities where people come and listen to you or somebody else talk. And the truth of the matter is, most people learn by doing. And so, what we did is that we made sure that as a part of our on ramping for discipleship, it was to get people involved. And so, for this particular group of people, one of the things that we did is that we made them the parking team. Is that I grabbed them, I taught them out, I told them, hey, look, we're gonna outgrow this parking lot in a little bit. Here's how we're gonna park it, here's how we're gonna do it. And I gave them that responsibility. And they could not believe it. As a matter of fact, many of these guys ended up in a part of our as a part of our deacons in training and ministers in training programs. And they ended up in those programs because we made it easy for them to get active. Man, it should not be hard to serve in the church. It should not be hard to come forward. And I know what you're thinking, and I'm going to address that in a minute. But I'm telling you, you've got to make it easy for people to serve. One of the quickest ways for the church to become sticky for people is by allowing them to share in the responsibility of the church. That's biblical. That's not opinion, that's biblical. Everybody's supposed to be doing something. And so, one of the things that you have to do is you have to understand that getting people active is not just having them do what you want them to do, but it's having them do what the church needs. It's having them do things that they can connect with, where they can build relationships and where they can take responsibility. All right. So you got to make it easy for people to serve. Number four, and this is so important, don't stop believing in God and don't stop believing in people. Let me tell you what I mean. You know, a lot of, people would have told me I was crazy for taking some guys fresh off the street and within a couple of weeks having them be in our parking lot and be the first face that people saw. And I knew they was dudes, man. And I knew they probably flirted with some ladies, some of the other young college girls coming through the parking lot. And I knew all those things. I'm telling you, like I heard the stories and we would have the conversations and we would do it. But here's why it was so important is I knew that I had to go through the process with them in order to get to the other side. You know, sometimes I think what we want to do is we want to fix people in private and then present them once they've got it all together. And I'm telling you, it didn't work that way. And what I realized is that I was going to have to let people see them die, let people see them resurrected, and let people see them triumphant and going forward in what God had called them to do. Right? That's one of the things that we had to do. And so the first face you would see were some guys who I knew still had some habits that weren't great, We're still doing some things. As a matter of fact, if I'm honest, I remember one particular Sunday, they all came to church with band-aids on their face because they had gotten into a fight together in the club the night before. And as rough as it was a great teaching moment. And I sat there and I walked with them. I said, "Hey, look, I ain't gonna give up on you guys." I said, "But listen, I need y'all to make different decisions. We live in a different life now, man. We ain't in the streets no more. You're different. You're redeemed. We walking forward, man. We going into something else." And we would just walk through that process. And every time they would go out, fewer and fewer of them would go. It started out with all 30 of them going, and then it would be 20 of them, and then 15, and then 10, and 5. And slowly but surely that thing started to turn. But it was because I never stopped believing in God and his ability to change people. I had to believe in his ability to change them, in his ability to turn their lives around. And you cannot be afraid of letting people see the real process that people go through. You can't be afraid of that. That's discipleship, man. Discipleship is a life on display. It's a life of allowing people to see. I think about Lazarus. The scripture says that when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, people would come from all the surrounding towns to see who? Jesus and Lazarus. Man, I say this all the time, but I mean it. Sometimes people want to see the one who can raise the dead, but sometimes they want to see the dead that he has raised. And when people would come to church, and the same guys that they knew used to be in the club, used to be fighting, used to be wilding out, used to be doing all these different things, these same guys were now standing outside in some nice shoes, in a pair of slacks. They might have been sagging in their slacks a little bit, but it's okay. They had a button-down shirt and a tie on, and you could tell they felt uncomfortable. You could tell it was different for them, but they did it because I went to the thrift store, and in our men's group, I taught them how to tie ties. I taught them how to shine their shoes. I taught them how to iron and put a crease in their pants. I taught them these things, and because we taught them all these things, now I could sit back and say, God, I'm going to trust you to do what only you could do, because this is Lazarus. That some people are going to come to see Lazarus. Those 25 people who came in 7 days, they didn't come to see me. And I would argue they didn't come to see Jesus because they probably didn't know about him. They came because Lazarus invited them. And so you cannot stop believing in the power of God to change people. God might bring a revival in your church through the most unlikely of characters. And so you have got to keep on believing in what God can do and in who people can become. Number 5, the next thing you've got to do, and this is something that we did, is that you've got to teach your church to fish in the ocean. I find it so strange that the church has decided to only fish in the aquarium. The aquarium is a set aside space where all the fish are trapped. We know that they're there, and but there's a limited amount of fish in the aquarium based on its size. And I'm convinced that fishing in the aquarium is like going after churched people, people who know Jesus, people who have been in the church. But going after unchurched people is like fishing in the ocean. And you've got to teach your people to fish in the ocean. And I know fishing in the ocean is scary because in order to really fish in the ocean and do it good, you got to go away from the shore. You got to go away from what you know. You got to go away from what you're comfortable with. You got to go away from the things that you've always done, and you've got to step into a new thing. And I know it can be a scary thing to do, but you have got to teach your people to fish in the ocean. The ocean is one of the scariest places in the world to me. Man, I watch the Discovery Channel all the time, and there are hundreds and thousands and maybe even millions of species that we haven't even discovered that live at the bottom of the ocean. Like, it's stuff that you can't imagine. So I have this deep fear of open. As a matter of fact, not long ago, my wife and I, we went on a vacation and we went away for our anniversary. And as we were celebrating our anniversary, we went to the Bahamas, and I booked this really nice catamaran reef snorkel tour, right? And I'm like, man, this is gonna be awesome. And so we get out there, we're on the boat, we're riding in the sun, we're feeling good. I'm out there, having a good time because I'm a pastor, but on vacation, don't nobody know me. So I'm out here with my shirt off and my feet out, we just having a good time. And we get out to the reef, and it's time for us to actually jump and go see it. My wife jumps in quick. She's out there looking down in the water. The reef looks like it's in HD, like it's in 4K. It's how clear it is because it's this clear blue water in the Bahamas. And so it's my turn to go, and I know I can swim enough to stay alive. We got on life jackets, but I have a fear of open water because I can't control Like I need to be able to hold something, put my feet on something. And so I go like I'm finna jump down. I'm trying to play bowl. And then I get to the stairs and I get nervous. Lady behind me screams, "Hey, it's time for you to go. We got to, everybody else, let's go get in now." Right. And so I just jump. And immediately I swim over. I swim back over to the other side of the boat where the ladder is. And I sit there and I hold on to the ladder. And then I look down into the reef and start having a good time. But at least I got something to hold on to. And my wife is like, "Babe, come look at this. It's so pretty." I said, "It's pretty over here too. I'm good." And I stay over there where it's solid. And guess what? I missed out on some beautiful views and some beautiful experience because my fear was trying to keep me from going into the deep. And so not only do you need to teach and challenge your church to fish in the ocean, but you've got to push past the fear, especially the fear of opinion. All right, a couple things. Number one, you want to push past the fear of your own opinion. Push past the fear of what it will look like if you start reaching people and it doesn't go perfectly. Man, reaching unchurched people is messy. I know, I'm telling you, it's messy, but it's still right. It's still what we're called to do. It's still a part of who we are. And you've got to embrace it. You've got to embrace reaching out, launching out into the deep, and doing all the things that God has called you to do. You've got to embrace it because it's a part of your call. Push past the opinion of others. Some people would have judged us for allowing some of these guys and some of these young ladies to be involved in ministry when they were so raw and when they couldn't get it right, when they would say the wrong things to people. But I knew it was a part of the discipleship process. And the one of the things I said to myself, if Jesus wasn't ashamed of Peter, then I'm not going to be ashamed of the people that God sent me. Just like Peter, these people, all disciples have to go through a process. The rough edges have to be smoothed off. Their rough edges have to be refined. They have to be taught. They have to be trained. All of those things have to happen. But Jesus committed 3.5 years of his life to publicly smoothing the rough edges of his disciples and recording the story all along the way so that the whole world through all of eternity could read about who they were, what they did, what their mistakes were, learn from them, and be able to drive them forward. If Jesus could do it, so can I. And if I can do it, so can you. But you've got to push past the fear of the opinions. Push past the fear of what it's going to look like. Push past the fear of what people are going to think. Push past the fear of what you even might think about yourself and step into the reality of what God is trying to do through you and through your church. All right. Listen, I know I've shared some great stuff. And if you want to take some next steps and you want to know how you can move forward and how you can really begin to move the needle forward, then here's what I want you to do next. I want you to book a breakthrough session with me. I do a 45-minute breakthrough session with leaders who want to move their ministry forward. On this 45-minute free call, I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to get to know your church. I'm going to get to know the potential of what God could do and will do through you and through your ministry. And as I get to know you, as I get to know your church, you're going to walk away with some real takeaways. I'm going to give you 3 potential takeaways, 3 things that you can do to begin to move your church forward. And if I think you're a great fit and I think I can help you, if I think that you're the kind of person who's a great fit to work with me, right? I work with people who are movers, who are serious about going forward, who are serious about getting things done. And if I think you're a great fit, I'll tell you how to be a part of one of our programs or one of our cohorts, and I'll make that invitation to you on the call. But we'll start with a free 45-minute call. All right. All you've got to do is click the link in the description or reach out to me, DM me the word breakthrough, and I will send you the link and I will get you set up for a breakthrough session so we can have some time to break away and talk. All right. So listen, somebody asked this question. Every time I sign off, I say, keep the gears turning, keep the gears turning, right? Because our systems, we're all about gears. That's what we do. It's our logos, it's how we think, all of those kind of things. So what am I talking about when I say that? When I say keep the gears turning, I understand that when you turn one gear, the way gears work, if they're connected, when you turn one, you turn all of them. And so what I'm saying to you is, even if you don't need to try to turn all the gears by yourself. Don't try to turn them all by hand. But you keep being the one person who's turning at least one gear. And if you can keep that turning that one gear, guess what? The rest of the gears will keep on turning. And I believe Galatians 6 and 9 is true. That you should not get tired of doing good, because you will reap a harvest at the proper time if you faint not. So I speak that over your life. And I pray that until next time, you would keep the gears turning. Peace.